So we will jump into it just similar to the way that we handled our discussion yesterday. I have 3 questions for the panel. We will start first with DJ on question number 1. Question 2, we'll start with Boone, and then we'll go back the other way for the final question. And we'll then allow, after the 3 questions, we'll allow the 3 panelists to offer any closing remarks. Is that okay? So the first question, and we asked yesterday, just so all of you know and just get a sense of what we've been doing. For the last 2 days, we have been here as ULTCW member leaders for the first time having 2 straight day conversations about leadership and the importance of recognizing the leadership that each of us innately have, but the activism and the issues that allow us to demonstrate that leadership. We talked about different obstacles and that might get in the way, like labels and stereotypes. We had some really honest conversations with each other about how we get labeled, but also about how we often label others and how those things really get in the way of what we really want to build in our society. So yesterday's panel, as you heard me say, was Senator Holly Mitchell, Senator Alex Padilla, and one of SEIU's National Executive Vice Presidents, Valerie Long. We talked with them and sort of asked them the same 3 questions, and I really want the members to really get a sense from you guys, what might be different in your experiences from some of the things that they may have heard yesterday. And it may actually all be the same, but the members will tell us if there are some commonalities. So the first question, DJ, is you'll start. And it's, when did you sense a call to leadership? And what did that moment look like?
First of all, I'm very honored to be here. And I want to feel your power. For immigration reform, we want our lawmaker act fast, right? So if I say act, can you say fast? Act!
Fast!
Act! Act! Thank you. I feel the power of SEIU and long-term healthcare workers. A few days ago, Miguel called me about this meeting and this too much exciting space. And at the time, I had a time conflict because today and yesterday, my son has a soccer tournament. His team kind of sucks. They lose all the time. But I made him a promise I'll be there. But when I was invited to this meeting, I could not say no, because I really, really have to say thank you to SEIU, international and local, and all your members for your concern and for your leadership and for your commitment for immigration reform. Thank you. As you know, for immigration reform, this is about family. This is about family who are trying their best to provide better life for their families and better opportunity for their children. And they are the workers. We are the workers. We work for the families, we work for the community, and we work for this country. As healthcare workers, long-term care workers, teachers, janitors, we are the workers of this country. But just because of the paper, we don't get that respect. We don't get that dignity. Isn't it right? But our community, our country need immigrant and need new movement that immigrant, non-immigrant, children, senior, young people, old people, we will work together. And look at you. This really represent what America is about. So diverse. Even though we look different, even though we come from different community, when it's about family, when it's about workers' rights, when it's about dignity, we all work together. So I feel very honored to be here, and I just want to say, I cannot thank you enough for SEIU, all your leadership, and all your members. Such a great power and contribution. I'm saying this because as an immigrant, I came to this country when I was 18 years old, and it was really hard. I remember when I went to school in suburban Illinois, as a recent immigrant, 18 years old, didn't know any language, didn't know anything. In the classroom, I start speaking broken language, broken English, and everybody start laughing. And at that time, I really hated to go to school. And as a recent immigrant, I had to help my mom. She used to run a small drop-off, the washing other people's laundry. So every weekend, I had to, go help my mom, and I hated weekend. So, back then, I thought there was a life of immigrant. Just like, do not belong here, and I feel really low about myself, and I cannot speak English, and everybody judge me. The way I look, the way I speak. But I was very lucky enough to introduce the community center in Chicago, and because I had a hard time, and my high school counselor, you got to graduate high school. So if you want to graduate, you got to go to school. And since you're having a hard time, maybe this community center will help you. I remember the first day I walked into that classroom. It was about in the evening. There was a small study group, and they were learning about civil rights movement, and they were watching Eyes on the Prize, the documentary. When I walked into that space and start watching that documentary, I was so moved. People like me, people of color with black hair, they kept marching even though police were beating them, even though dogs were biting them, just for human rights, just for dignity, just for the respect and equality for all. And watching that documentary and learning about civil rights movement, learning about farm workers movement, learning about the struggle for 8 hours workday, the progress movement really helped me to find a better place, new land. I felt like I belong here. People like me making a history, and together we're moving forward. So I think that really changed my life, and especially SEIU and whole immigration reform. I gotta say this. Last year, I was really down, especially end of last year. I was really angry because I believe the last year was a year for immigration reform, and what I heard at the end of the last year in November was really depressing. Immigration reform was there. And at that time, the faith community, labor, and community group got together and they set up the tent in DC with the name of Fast for Family. And for that, without SEIU, international, local member support, we could not have done that. And once we set up the tent, it became a tent of hope. And to me, it really taught me what our struggle, what our fighting was about. I realized sometimes I become like I'm fighting against something, and I become angry. I become very disappointed. But that whole experience, Fast for Family, really taught me there is something that we are fighting for. Our families and our community. And when we set up the tent, so many immigrant families came to the tent, and they shared their story. Stories of struggle, but also stories of hope and dream. I remember we had one immigrant mother who came to the tent with her 4 children and drove 4 hours from Philadelphia. She was sharing about 8 months ago, her husband was picked up by ICE while her husband was taking 12 years old daughter to school. So in front of the 12 years old daughter's eye, her father was taken away. Now, single mom raising 4 children, she had to come to DC. And because that traumatic experience, this 12-year-old daughter, since that moment, she got so shocked, she got so traumatized, she stopped talking. And she was seeing a therapist. And while she was sharing her story, her daughter was sitting next to her and crying. But not only that, after that experience, she went to the Congress and stood in a Congress hallway in front of the Speaker Boehner's house, Boehner's office from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for a whole week, every day, more than 8-9 hours, pray and chant and really remind the lawmaker who we are, how we work hard for this country, what this family means to us. And then the really interesting was, after 2 weeks later, the mother and 4 children, they came back to tent again. I could not believe what I heard at that moment. The mother was sharing, since that moment, that the daughter seeing her mother sharing her story, the daughter seeing her mother fighting everything she can to fix the immigration reform, the daughter start talking. So, to me, I'm just an immigrant, and I'm having a hard time, speaking English, learning about new system. But people like union, community member, mother like her, children like her, all of you, teach me and show me the spirit and show me the power, how we can change this country, how we can change the law that respect another human being. So I'm very here, so thank you.
Nadi, same question. When did you sort of hear the call of leadership and sort of share with us what that moment looked like for you?
Sure. So my mother, my sister, and I came to this country in 1997. My grandmother had lived here in Pasadena, California since the 80s. But the reason we came was really out of safety. My parents were going through a very difficult divorce. My mother feared that if she stayed, she would lose the custody of my sister and I back home. And so we fled in the middle of the night. And that's how we came to this country, to meet with my grandmother in Pasadena. And I'm sharing that story because that was, I think, the first moment as a 8-year-old, 9-year-old, where I felt the need to act, where I felt it didn't necessarily come from a political stance, but it came from just a gut feeling that my mother needed me to step up in a different way. And that was it. She came to this country after being a business owner, having an education back in Mexico, came here to clean houses, clean offices, deliver newspapers during the night. She, for 7 years, only slept 3 hours a day. Raised 2 daughters by herself, and we lived in a garage that had no insulation. We had a single bed for the 3 of us, and so I became a second parent to my sister. And that was, I feel, my big moment of being politicized, to see the reality that a lot of immigrant women were facing in this country, and then to imagine what would I face as an immigrant woman myself, even though I was 9 years old and I knew that I was gonna be raised here. But I also understood that I didn't really feel like I belonged here. And the same like DJ, going to school faced a lot of the same issues, being in a classroom right after Prop 209 had passed. We had getting rid of a bilingual education that was mandatory before. So I didn't have any space to practice English besides watching TV and watching cartoons. And that's, I think, how I learned English. It wasn't in the classroom, unfortunately. The education was not good. It wasn't good for me to make that transition. But my mother picked up immediately in that moment of crisis of watching me start slowly losing interest in school, not wanting to go to school, crying as soon as I would see the bus, roll into our corner, and then I didn't want to go, that she realized she had to do something. So she got involved, and she started asking questions. She started demanding that there would be interpreters, right? That she was going to learn English, but in the meantime, there had to be access to what was going in that classroom and what was happening to her child. And so she became a parent activist. And soon after, she became part of a nonprofit in Pasadena that worked with day laborers and domestic workers. And she became a leader, and I grew up watching that. I grew up in spaces where people were talking about, the political juncture and, liberation theology and neoliberalism and sexism. And I grew up being part of these conversations. And I think my big moment or my big leap of realizing and recognizing that I had agency and power to do something myself came around my teens, when I also realized that there was really no spaces, even in the progressive movement, for young people. But spaces where we can honestly not just be token poster kids, but be part of decision making. And that was my big moment. And then going into college, being part for a long, long time, very conscious of being undocumented in this country since my early teens. Going into college, I knew I had rights. We live in a very blessed state where we had already in-state tuition laws that allow me to go to school and pay the same, even though I was undocumented. But I had graduated from, high school. I had been raised here. This was home for me. But other states didn't have that. But I knew we had to go beyond. And so in college, I founded at UC Santa Cruz a student group to support undocumented students stay in school. So we were able to go in school, but then we didn't have any access to financial aid at the state level, financial aid at the federal level. We could apply to very few private scholarships, but even merit scholarships. I remember the first quarter after I started school, I received a beautiful letter from our chancellor with the sealed, the fancy paper that said, because of your grades, we're rewarding you with a merit scholarship to cover your full tuition for the next year. And I felt exactly how you all felt. We're very happy. And as soon as I returned the letter and said, yeah, I accepted, I got a second letter that said, sorry, we can't give it to you because you're undocumented. And so that was the moment to realize that we needed to change a lot more things, that there was a way for me to stay there, but I had to figure out a way to remain there, to graduate, and then what was I gonna do with the degree still being undocumented? And so that's where my big politicization and my big kind of agency leap of taking power and taking ownership of my own self happened. And then in 2010, we led a huge campaign to pass the Federal DREAM Act. Facing a lot of different challenges, facing a lot of different people telling us it's not the right thing, it should be part of a larger comprehensive immigration reform, but we felt that it was necessary to show and win something so that our families can continue to fight. I mean, we had been losing systematically for a long time. And so we did it, we were called rebels and we were called, but yeah, and I see a few folks that understand that. And we got very close. The DREAM Act passed in the House of Representatives, no problem. In the Senate, it missed. We needed 5 more votes to win. And that moment was a big changing moment for me to realize that we had to become even more creative about our strategies. And I now work with labor. I'm part of the Clean Car Wash campaign. Our work has been to unionize low-wage immigrant undocumented workers, car wash workers in LA. And our strategies, just like many of you, we have to be strategic, right? When we're trying to go after something, we don't do one single thing. We do 5 different things. We move 5 different tracks, and we put pressure on every single button we can, because we know that eventually we will press 1 or 2 of those to win. And I think we learned that too. I think as young leaders, we learned that from all of you. We learned that from our parents. We learned that our parents weren't just sitting around hoping that things will happen to them, but they were fighting every day. Even though there were so many obstacles, we learned from our mentors in the movement that they didn't just figure out one way of winning things, they figured out many ways. So we decided to go a second way of doing this, and then we focused our energies on the president. And in 2012, after a year and a half campaign pressuring President Obama to use his executive power to protect young people like myself from being deported, he came to the Rose Garden and announced that he would, and he did the right thing. And in June of 2012, he stopped the deportations of 2 million undocumented youth. 500,000 of them now have work permits, including myself and my sister. I know that a lot of different people like DJ and others, you know, they've been leading the way, and I feel like what we have brought to the movement is a little spark to give more hope, to show that we can win, that we can be innovative and be creative and push places and push in directions that we've been too afraid in the past to push. But that's our role as young people, is to do that. And so I think that that's what I want to leave in terms of when was my calling. My calling was out of urgency, out of need of survival, but also out of wanting to take ownership of my own life. That's where my calling came from.
Thank you, Nadia. Cool.
Is this working?
Yep.
Well, first off, I want to thank Lafonza for I like the introduction. It was great, but I have never been called a cutie pie before. I almost want to just put that at the very top of my bio now and get rid of everything else. So thank you very much for that. And thank you to all of you. The SCIU has actually supported the nonprofit that I created recently, I Vote. Sorry, can you hear me okay? I see someone out there saying I'm not talking loud enough, which is a first. You can't hear me?
They're bringing a mic. They're going to change your mic out. Exactly. While that's happening, you know, these conferences take a lot of work to produce, and we're seeing our production team in action. So I wanted to recognize Shauna O'Brien and all of our production team, as well as all of our interpreters who have been sitting in those booths for the last 2 days, making sure that everyone could communicate and be a part of today. And so I think your mic might now be working.
Can you hear me now? Yeah? Is that better? Okay. Right? I was wondering if anyone was going to get that. So the call to leadership, it's come quite a few times for me. Contrary to popular belief, it was not a booming voice from the sky. That was a joke. You know, I immigrated here when I was 4 years old. I'll tell you something that a lot of people don't know. I was born in Libya, not Libyan, but I was born there. My parents are both from Pakistan. I'm almost like a terrorist poster child because I was also born on 9/11. So I can't tell you. Luckily, when I start talking when I'm at the airport, I'm okay. But beyond that, I'm solid proof that if there's a higher power, he certainly has a sense of humor. So, my parents brought me, my older brother, younger sister here when I was 4. We immigrated to this tiny little town, 160 miles north of LA. If anyone's ever seen Varsity Blues, if you take that small Texan town and you transplant 160 miles north of LA, that's basically where I'm from, which is cool, except when you look like this. It presented a lot of challenges, and that goes back to how leadership came to be for me. I was in a fraternity at UCLA, and Franklin Covey sponsored it. And one of the things I learned through the leadership program that he created is that 90% of people aren't by nature designed to be leaders. I actually consider myself to be part of that 90%. I think later on in life, and especially given my experience in a small town, I came to understand what leadership was. I think inherently as an immigrant, you have the odds stacked against you. I don't think that's a bad thing. If anything, I really, really relish in it. As a result, being in a small town, there was a lot of opportunities that I just didn't get. My parents owned a small motel. My first job was, believe it or not, being a maid. To this day, I am very, very good at making a bed and cleaning a toilet. And you know, had it not been for a lot of these difficulties that I went through, if you want to call them that, I don't think I would have thought that I wouldn't have had this drive to be better, to work harder, to give that extra, 10% that a lot of people aren't willing to give. For me, that's what leadership has been. The calling has been when someone said, you can't have that, and I said, oh yeah? Yes, I can. So I started out with, I think, how a lot of young people probably did in student government, and basically worked up from there. I was captain of my track team, as I said, student government, both in high school as well as community college. When I transferred to UCLA, I was in the leadership for the IFC, the Interfraternity Council. For the purposes of today and what you've heard about me and what I've done, the most recent call, the one that I think truly defined who I've become, it came pretty late. I moved to LA to work in entertainment. I wanted to make movies. I always loved the idea of inspiring people through storytelling. I thought that was cool. It's a lot of what inspired me to get out of this small town and to be who I am today. Now that said, it was around 2004 when I was fortunate enough to be working for a pretty prominent actor in Hollywood who knew Senator Obama personally. At the time, I was just an assistant, but he ended up getting a phone call from someone who was introducing him to the senator, and I was fortunate enough to meet him. At that point, I should tell you, I'm a little bit representative of this younger electorate that I wouldn't say I'm like this now, but I do think that a lot of young people, unfortunately, aren't engaged, and I'll get into why I think that is, and it's pretty representative of what I do now. Now that said, I had an opportunity to meet at the time Senator Obama. And I don't know about you guys, but I have spoken to a lot of leaders, a lot of politicians, and there's times when I feel like they're looking right through me and they're thinking about doing their laundry or something else. They are not hearing anything that I'm saying. When I was fortunate enough to meet, at the time, Senator Obama, it was the first time that I felt like he actually cared about what I had to say. He was interested in the fact that I was an immigrant. I don't know if I'm responsible for this. I don't think I am, but I always get a little silly grin on my face anytime I hear him say the country's Pakistan, because it's pronounced Pakistan, not Pakistan. He actually pronounces it the way it's supposed to be pronounced. And I remember when I first told him that, he made a concerted effort to pronounce it as Pakistan. It was the tiniest, most minute thing that just made me realize that, okay, this guy, he has something. So for me, the combination of both meeting him and just having that personal connection, but I think more importantly, so many young people, the 2004 election, call what you want, I don't think it went the way it was supposed to go. And that was frustrating for a lot of people. I personally don't think that we should have been in Iraq. There's a lot of other reasons that I could list, but that was one that deeply resonated for me. And that's tough for me to say because I came from a military town. I have a lot of friends that went out there that were confused about why they were there, what they were fighting for. It's a tough thing to be straddling that middle line. That was one of the big reasons that led me to then at the end of 2006 when a few of my friends and I got wind that Obama was considering a presidential run. We decided we wanted to do something about it. We wanted to create a voice for young people in Los Angeles, the young progressives in LA, mainly based in the arts and entertainment community, to help out Senator Obama. Now, I can't tell you how many people, established and unestablished, looked at us. I mean, we were there at the very beginning that said, that's nice, you're going to help out Obama, he's not going to win. I to this day love just, and I still see some of those people, I'm like, yeah, you told me he wasn't going to win. So we created this organization. We called it, at the time it was called 008. And the idea, again, was to use arts and new media, et cetera, movies, television, to fundraise and galvanize young people around Obama. And I think that's what we did rather successfully. On top, it's great to say that we raised 1.6 million. It's very impressive, but the stuff that I was really proud of was, I don't know how many people have seen the Hope poster that Shep Ferry designed. That was originally disseminated by us. Shep was friends with one of my friends. That's how we got a hold of the poster. I put up 200 of those myself all around LA, and now it's in the Smithsonian. So, what I'm getting at as far as just this call to leadership, it comes in a lot of ways. For me, it was passion. It was believing in something. And it's something that at a young age, I think so many of us are told that there's certain things you can't have. And I would urge all of you, especially those of you that have young kids, to just instill in them that, to never believe that. If you want it, you can have it. And that's something that, those are just words to live by, and it's been my mantra. And anytime this call to leadership comes up, whether it's professionally in my life, as a film producer, or in my political work, or my philanthropic work, or what I'm doing nonprofit. This is why I'm single, by the way. I'm always doing this stuff.
You heard him say
really
he was
busy.
single. You heard him say he was single.
But point being is, like, I relish in doing this stuff for both the progressive community, for people that believe in issue-based activism. It's something that I think young people, they got disenfranchised in 2000, 2004. There were certainly things to activate them, but it was 2008 that made the difference. It was things like the Hope poster and young people that were rallying around Obama that made the established electorate pay attention. It's great to say that we helped accomplish that. Going into 2012, my partner and I, we redefined what we wanted to do with the creation of this nonprofit called iVote. And the idea was that I saw young people post-2008 that were becoming very disengaged with the political process. And so the idea with iVote was, okay, even though we did great things for Obama, Jerry Brown, and lots of other candidates, we wanted to focus on issue-based activism, because I think the one way to connect with young people may not necessarily be by saying, hey, vote for this guy. It's more about these core issues, whether it's immigration, I'll take it. Or there's so many progressive issues that unfortunately don't get their time in the sun, and I think that's something that personally I think we need to focus on as a progressive in the community. So, anyway, that's all I got.
Thanks. So we're going to do one more round, actually. Instead of 3 rounds, we'll do one more round. And similar to the way that I did yesterday, here's something you may not know. Boone and his, I don't want to say business partner because it's not a business. It's a sort of nonprofit organization. Boone has a partner that he works with that they both sort of came to me through a mutual friend that we all have. And we were, if you recall, in 2012, really in the fight of our lives. We were trying to defeat Prop 32 and trying to make sure that Proposition 30 passed so that in the next budget, we weren't seeing cuts to our programs at the state level. And so Boone and his partner came to me to talk about the idea that they had. How do we use the ways that young people communicate to get them involved in issues that they may not think have anything to do with them? And so they set about creating a really creative, innovative campaign that really reached out to young voters. And then the state of California did online voter registration. And I think the combination of online voter registration and the online work that we had already been doing through iVote really was what helped to inspire that no vote from young voters on Proposition 32, in addition to how much they cared about the education budget in our state. And so there's all the time, there's sort of the untold story of how young voters and young activists sort of find their way into making a contribution that often goes unnoticed by traditional, mainstream, older leaders in our state. And so I'm going to change the question a little bit. One of the things that we've been trying to sort of wrestle with and have charged our millennial leaders to helping us to figure out is, what is it that causes that generational tension? So the question is, can you tell us about one moment where you experienced generational tension, and how was it bridged? You can be honest, this is family here.
Generational tension. Is my mic off again? Nope. Can you hear me now? Yes?
Yeah, there you go.
By the way, normally everyone tells me I'm really loud, so this is a first for people not to be able to hear. You can hear me okay though, right? Okay. So generational tension, it's certainly something that I saw a lot of in 2008, and more so in 2012, because I think you did see a lot of people, the gap between young and well, let's call it young and old, or activated and unactivated, and initiated and uninitiated, was certainly bigger in 12 than it was in 8. For me, I think the way that I typically gap anything is by something that, to this day, I don't think I'm great at it, but it's listening. My parents at a very young age told me that you always listen to your elders. For the longest time, I didn't. But it is something that goes a long way, and I remember that in 2008 we were looked at as people that sort of fired from the hip. We were the young guns that were coming in and telling everyone that Obama was the way to go, even though we had no experience whatsoever with the political process. But we were representative of what this country is becoming. It's becoming it's us that are, it's immigrants, it's young people that are now representing the majority of the electorate. So now activating them, is something else entirely. One of the things that I voted done recently with 2012 was we ended up, we create new media, viral videos, content that is streamed online via YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, etc. And we ended up, I think, activating, we had 21 million unique hits. That's huge. And when you look at what the gap ended up being for Obama winning the election, it was for young people, I think between 5 and 8%. That right there solves your problem. So being able to, I think, point to success is one way to certainly bridge that divide. Listening, in my mind, I certainly believe that you do have to look at how the political process was to understand what it's going to be. So for me, it's just that engagement, not necessarily shaking your head and having deaf ears when you don't believe in something. There's certain issues that we're not going to solve if we just charge ahead. I think you have to forge relationships with people across the aisle. It is a lot of the things that you hear. You heard Obama say in 2008 and 12. I was recently at a fundraiser for Cory Booker, and that's all he talks about is the same type of thinking, where if you're going to get anything done in Congress or the Senate, you've got to reach across the aisle. So.
Great. Nadi, same question.
I think this is a great theme, right? Because you worked on making sure President Obama got elected. I remember walking, in 2008, even though I was undocumented and I couldn't vote and I still can't vote, I still understood that I could play a role to get people excited about voting. And then fast forward 2011, 2012, we had this campaign to see if he could grant relief to some folks like myself. And we knew we had a short window of time because we knew then there was going to be re-election. And it was like a fine line of wanting to push, but at the same time show that we were still as committed to make sure that he was going to get reelected the next time around. And so we knew it was a short period of time. And I think that's been, in my experience, the generational tension of always kind of playing by the same rules, and being in spaces where, you know, you're looked as a young person and it's like, these are the rules, and this is the way of the land, and this is how we do things every single time. And bringing in new ideas sometimes is scary, and especially when there is no success track record, or trying to, or even defining what is a success track record when you are trying to kind of play that role. And so, you know, during that campaign, which we call the Right to Dream campaign, and then, you know, June, President comes out and says, you know, this is the right thing to do. We should stop the deportations of these young people. That summer was the biggest mobilization of undocumented youth across the country to get people to vote that we had ever seen ever in history. Young people, especially undocumented youth, took it upon themselves to go out to places we had never been before, to tell people the story of how this was someone, this was a person, this was the president that actually listened. That yes, we had to push, but ultimately did the right thing, and that we needed to make sure he was gonna be there for another 4 years. And I think those are the moments where we had to engage with our elders, with our mentors, and say, we understand the short window of time, but trust us. Like, can we try to push? If we lose, we lose. But if we win, can you imagine the story we're gonna be able to tell to get him reelected? Can you imagine the re-energizing of hope on immigration, on, you know, young people and education issues? And it played out exactly like that. And then the following year, everybody was ready to roll out and have the biggest fight for immigration reform, and we're still fighting for that. And so I think that's the story I always share of playing. It's a dance. It's a dance of listening, of pushing, of being humble, but also being determined, and just knowing that we might disagree, but we're still part of the same family. So I might disagree with my grandmother on a certain thing, but I'm always gonna be by her side. And I think that has been my experience with the generational tension.
Perfect.
Yeah.
DJ?
I think that's kind of very deep question.
It is.
I think we need a wine for that. I'm just thinking, you know, generation tension, also tension between immigrant and non-immigrant. I think many ways we can look at that, but I think it can be very hard question, but I think it can be very also simple way to look at it. Like she mentioned, there was one time we just did a Fast for Family bus tour, and I remember in late February or early March, we were in Wisconsin, and we happened to participate the town hall that Paul Ryan sponsored. It's a very little town in Wisconsin, and there were like 200 people in a room. It was packed, but I was the only Asian. And the group we were with, about 7, 8 people, we were the only people of color in that 200 people. And it was very conservative setting, very loyal to Paul Ryan, and everybody was Republican. And then once we walk into the room, everybody started looking at us. And while I was sitting, the person next to me, he was a old, retired person, Caucasian. He asked me, very cynical look, are you with this amnesty group? And then it was I felt the tension. It was first time seeing an immigrant, or first time seeing an Asian. And there was not much discussion. It was very cold. We raised a couple questions. There was a lot of boo. We asked questions to Paul Ryan, you know, what is your stance on immigration? There was a lot of boo. And then we felt really fear. Oh my God. Because, you know, living in LA, I never feel that way. But the interesting was, after the town hall, I was outside sitting on the bench. And there was all the Caucasian man with white hair. He came to me, why you are here? And we start talking about 30 minutes. And I told him about, immigrant came here. My mom wants to have a, better education. That's why we came. Also, my mom wants to be with her family. She waited like 13, 15 years. Many immigrants, they come here to work for, for their families. And, we're not criminal. We are just here for the same reason, with the hope and dream. And he started talking. He's like a fifth, sixth generation from Europe and Ireland. Or my great-great-grandfather also came for better life, for better country, with the same hope and same dream. So there's a lot of common ground. And he start understanding. But also we talk about, 20, 30 years from now, 80 million of baby boomers will be retired. And our country have a very low rate of birth rate. So we don't have a baby, we don't have a workforce. And who's going to work for this country? Who's going to pay for your Medicare and Social Security? We need an immigrant. And then we start talking, and then there's a lot of common ground. So what I'm trying to say is, I think there's a lot of tension and fear because they do not know who we are. Because they never had a conversation, like she mentioned. So just I think we got to organize many places like this, within the membership, within the church, within the workspace, community, neighborhood conversation about, at the end of the day, we want better education for our kids. We want to have an increased minimum wage. We want to have a better pension, right? And we want to have affordable housing. I mean, all our hope is same. We want to have a safe community. But, we just look different. But we are also the same human being with the same hope and dream. We just got to we just got to organize ourselves and work together, right? Because we have the same dream. So I just believe that it's not a big answer. Just kind of like simple. I think you just kind of start talking, having conversation, and then organize ourselves. That's just my limited answer. Yeah.
So we are running a little bit over time, so I'm going to ask you to, let's thank our panel, our guests. I think they made an incredible contribution. I really believe they made an incredible contribution to how we think about and have been working on all kinds of issues, whether it's immigration reform, affordable housing, getting a quality living wage in our cities, counties, states, in our country. These folks are absolutely making their contribution, and I think we've heard stories on how to help us sort of break down the barrier and get rid of the label of young versus old. It really is about the issues that are important to all of us and to all of our communities and to all of our families. It starts with listening, it starts with communicating and being willing to push and challenge and accept what we get back, right? So thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for joining.